Hello there. This slide and presentation is going to go through a detailed breakdown of the requirements for the ABFO examination application. The goal of this presentation is to kind of work through this very large amount of information and give you kind of insight to exactly how to get these requirements accomplished and the process for which you will need to submit them as part of your application. There is going to be two ways that I'm going to approach this. I'm going to do a full presentation going through everything all together, and then I will actually kind of separate out each individual category of requirements and create separate videos for those so that if you need to just focus on one certain aspect of these requirements, you can go through to that section specifically and not have to sit through the whole presentation. So let's jump into it. The first thing that I want to state about these requirements is that they are listed in the ABFO Diplomates Reference Manual, or the DRM as I will call it throughout the rest of this presentation. Those are located in the Section 3 Policies and Procedures portion of the DRM, which right now encompasses page 13 to 18 of that section. Note that in the future, these pages may shift a little bit as changes are made to the DRM. This should be your first reference for the requirements, as that is the official breakdown of what the ABFO Certification and Examination, or the C&E Committee, is going to use when evaluating the application, your casework, the documentation you're submitting as proof of those requirements, etc. So anytime you start looking at requirements, that really should be the first place that you go. Even though I'm providing this kind of detailed breakdown, and that breakdown is based off of the DRM, still changes may have happened, and I may not have updated this presentation in a timely enough manner for you to be aware of those changes. So again, the DRM is the kind of Bible for what the requirements are and how to complete them. If you don't know where that DRM is located, it's on the ABFO website. Go to the Resources tab and then scroll down to that second item that says Reference Manual. It'll take you to this page. Section 3 is the Policies and Procedures. You'll click on that, open it up, and you can scroll down to the second page where there is the table of contents, and you're looking for those qualifications and requirements for certification. You can either click that link or again just scroll down until you find it, but here's the pages where all of that is listed out. Again, it's a lot of information. It can be a little bit cumbersome to get through, so that's why I'm going to go through everything for you here. The first tip that I'm going to give to you is that deadline is June 1st for your application submission. That is a hard deadline. Do not submit anything late. Please make sure that they get all aspects of your application by that June 1st deadline. If you get things to them after that, they may decline your application, and then you've got to wait a whole nother year, or they may take it, but again, it will look bad for you. It'll look like you're not quite as committed as maybe you'd like them to think, not as organized as you'd like them to think, that sort of thing. So just don't submit this late. Get your stuff to them by June 1st. Now, that being said, one thing I would recommend that you do is before you actually start submitting stuff, reach out to the chair of the C&E committee to figure out where they want you to send it and how they want you to send it. You're going to have to include a lot of supplemental material. They may want that in a PDF. They may want it in a Dropbox. They may want it in Google Drive. There's different ways that you can submit those materials. And I have found that just reaching out to the C&E chair to get clear, direct instructions on where and how they want it is the most efficient way to get that taken care of. You can find who the chair is by going to the ABFO website, finding the committee's listing, and then you'll see the chairperson listed under the Certification and Examination Committee, and then that person's email will be, you'll be able to find that in the diplomate listing, also on the ABFO website. So another aspect or another tip to this submission of your application is start putting your stuff together early. It is a lot of information to put together. And I think that most people don't realize how much information it is until they start trying to put it all together. This is not something that you're going to be able to do in a day. It's probably not even something you can really realistically do in a couple of days. So my recommendation is you need to be starting to compile everything by May 1st. Do not wait until May 30th. There are some things you have to request to be sent from other people. So, grant those people a courtesy, get started on it early. That way you can get everything taken care of before that June 1st deadline. Now, another tip is if you record things as you go and if you will kind of compile all that supplemental information and proof as you go through the requirements, it will make things so much easier when you actually do start putting your application together to submit it. I recommend just creating a folder on your computer, labeling it ABFO application, and then, dividing up all of your supplemental documentations into subfolders for whatever that documentation is proof of. Again, it's a lot of information to compile. If you will compile it as you go, it makes things so much easier. Most of these requirements are obtained over a series of years. So it's really tough when you're having to go back and find something you did 3 years ago if you don't have it very clearly stored somewhere on your computer. Again, create a folder for your application and just put things in there as you get them done. The ABFO has casework summary sheets that will be part of your application, and those sheets have dates and case numbers and agencies and other information on them, as well as a signature for approval by the appropriate agency. It is so much easier to fill those things out as you go, as you complete the casework. And again, don't wait until the month before application is due to get all these sheets filled out and get all the appropriate signatures, because it will take a lot of time and be potentially frustrating if you're trying to get a signature for something you did, again, 4 or 5+ years ago. Those sheets are found on the ABFO website in that Diplomate's Reference Manual, Policies and Procedures section, just right after the requirements breakdown. So that's where those are located. Print them off, go ahead and start using them as you are completing your casework. The last kind of overall tip that I have before we start getting into the requirements themselves is that the C&E committee has developed a requirement tracking spreadsheet. They may move to this being the way you submit your materials in the future. Right now, it's still kind of under development and beta testing, but it is very useful. It's designed to kind of break down things in a easy to follow manner for not only the C&E committee, but yourself. It's got little red indicators for things that you're still lacking, green indicators when you've got something completed. So again, it's a very helpful tool for tracking what you've done, tracking what you still need, and making sure that you've got all of the supplemental material you're going to have to submit as proof for all of these requirements. Dr. John Nace is the one who developed the spreadsheet, and he's the one that is distributing it. His email is listed there on the bottom of the slide. So if you want that spreadsheet, reach out to him. Again, if you're a couple of years away from having your requirements finished, I would recommend going ahead and getting the spreadsheet and starting to use it, as it may be implemented by the time you apply as the main way they are collecting the requirement information from applicants. So those are the general tips and tricks for just the overall application process that I have for you today. Next up is the requirements categories. There's basically 6 kind of overall categories of requirements, and I'm going to go through each of them individually. Again, this is kind of how I'm going to break down things in those smaller videos, just so that you don't have to sit through this whole presentation if you really just want to know about, say, the identification casework requirements. So first thing we're going to start out with is the general qualifications. and there's basically kind of two aspects to that. The first aspect is that you must be a good moral character person with high integrity, good reputation, good professional standards. Proof of that is going to come from basically 3 letters of recommendation. Those are going to be submitted directly to the C&E committee by the people who write the letters. So this is why I said reach out to the C&E chair before you start submitting things, because you're going to need to know where these letter writers need to send their letters. They should not send them to you. They need to go directly to the C&E committee. So these letters can come from anybody that you want to write them. They just need to be someone who can testify to your basically your character and your competence in forensic dentistry. So you may have a very good working relationship with a forensic anthropologist. They certainly can write you a letter. Your medical examiner can write you a letter. If you have been working with an ABFO diplomate, being mentored by them, those are all great people to write these letters of recommendations. My tip is that having as many of these letters be from forensic contacts gives more credence to your application. Letters from diplomates tend to look really, really good. So if you can get those, great. That's who I would recommend you have write these letters. The second general qualification is that you have to have a dental degree. Here in the United States, that's a DDS or a DMD. In other countries, it's basically whatever your equivalent dental degree is. The way that they will have you prove that you have a dental degree is you have to send transcripts from your dental school, and they will also ask for any postdoctoral degrees if you have those. So if you went to dental school and then let's say you did a residency program or a specialty program, you will need to submit transcripts from that program as well. Typically, you are going to have the school send those directly to the C&E committee. So, and again, that's outlined there. It's got to come directly from the school. Most schools, you go to the registrar's website and there's a little transcript request section. You go there, fill out all the stuff, and they'll send the transcripts wherever you need them sent. Again, recommend reaching out to the chair of the C&E committee prior to having these transcripts sent, just to make sure they are being sent to the correct email, and you don't have to send them twice because you didn't give them the correct place to send them in the first place. So that's the general qualifications, pretty easy portion of the overall requirements. The second requirement category is meetings, and there's really 2 portions for this requirement. There's an attendance requirement and a participation requirement. So for the attendance requirement, you have to have 4 meetings of a forensic dental or forensic organization, and you cannot count more than 1 meeting per year. So this is kind of one of the time limiting aspects of these requirements. You cannot apply to take the board exam any sooner than 4 years because you won't have met your 4 meeting attendance requirements. Meetings that I know for sure will count are the AAFS annual meeting, the ASFO annual meeting, and then any other annual meeting for a national or internationally recognized forensic organization. There are definitely some international forensic groups that have annual meetings, so if you attend one of those, that should count. Again, you cannot count more than 1 meeting per year. So the example I have listed here is you attend both the AAFS annual meeting and the ASFO in 2025. Only one of those counts as meeting attendance. It doesn't mean that you lose out on the other meeting. You can actually use the CE hours in your additional activity requirements under the continuing education portion. So we'll cover that a little bit later, but just know you can only count 1 meeting per year and you have to have 4 years of meeting attendance. So what they will require for proof of attendance is basically a meeting attendance record or a continuing education certificate. So make sure you're keeping those for each meeting you attend. If you attend a meeting that wasn't listed previously and you want to know, hey, would this potentially count? Just reach out to the C&E committee chair and ask. hey, will this meeting count as one of my attended meetings? If you are considering attending a meeting and you're not sure if it's going to count, I would obviously, again, reach out before you actually attend the meeting so that you're not making the trip thinking it's going to count and then find out later it wouldn't. So here's an example of what you would submit. This is my attendance certificate for the AAFS annual meeting in Orlando. Again, if you go to this meeting, you should get one of these every year that you go. So this is what you'll submit. Again, this is to verify that you did in fact actually attend the meeting and you aren't just claiming that you did. The second aspect of meeting requirements is the participation. You do have to participate in 2 annual meetings, and there's a variety of ways in which you can participate. That includes moderating a scientific session, potentially at the AAFS meeting or some other equivalent national meeting. You can actually do present a paper or a lecture at one of these national meetings. Sometimes these meetings have panelists for different things. If you serve as a panelist, that can count. Or if you are a member of the committee putting on the annual program, that is also considered participation in the meetings. So just like any of these requirements, you're going to have to prove that you did participate. If you moderated, presented, or served as a panelist, you're going to need to submit a copy of the program that lists your name and your role. If you participated as, say, a committee member or some other participation outside of the things I just said, an official letter is what you're going to need to submit, preferably done by the program chair or the committee chair, and then signed by that person, stating the role that you served in and what year and for what meeting. So here's an example of, again, a portion of the program for the AAFS meeting that I presented at. You'll see my little note over there that I also submitted a copy of the front page of the program to show what meeting and what year this occurred at. So you can also use this if you are a moderator, because you'll notice right there where my mouse is that the moderators are listed as well. So keep those if you present or moderate, because that's what you'll submit as proof. My tip for this requirement is that the acceptance of a meeting and attendance and participation is really completely up to the C&E committee. Again, the things that I've mentioned previously, I know for a fact will 100% count. If you have something out of the norm that you're going to try to submit for these requirements, I again just would recommend that you get pre-approval from the C&E committee by talking to their chairperson. I'm not saying that it won't count. I just, again, would hate for somebody to participate or attend a meeting thinking it is going to work and then being told, a couple of years down the road, nope, sorry, you can't use that one. And now you're, a year behind in your requirements. So that's the meeting section of the application requirements. The affiliation requirement has a little bit of kind of leniency with it. The first part of this is you must have a current active and formal affiliation with a medical legal agency. That would be like a law enforcement agency, a coroner's office, etc. That's kind of bullet point A for meeting this requirement. If you've got an active formal affiliation, you're good. You are going to need to have 2 years of formal active affiliation to be able to meet this requirement. So you can't have just been there for 6 months. It's got to be 2 years. The ABFO has recently kind of recognized that it sometimes is hard to get a formal affiliation without being board certified. So, well, how can I get board certified if I don't have a formal affiliation? It's kind of a never-ending cycle. So there is now kind of this other method for which you can fulfill this requirement. And that is basically, if you can't get a formal affiliation, you need to be actively mentored by an ABFO diplomate for 2 years. I have a list of willing mentors as part of the Diplomate Development Committee. So if you're struggling to get that, reach out to the Diplomate Development Committee chairperson, which is myself currently, Shawnatha Collier, and I will be happy to try to get you connected to someone. So a lot of you already have mentors potentially set up. So active mentorship for 2 years will also work to meet the affiliation requirement. So I'm going to go through the proof of these kind of based on the 2 different ways. If you have an active, proving that you're active over the last 2 years is going to come from the casework that you're recording. So the casework is going to be dated. They're going to be able to see, okay, yes, you've been doing casework within the last 2 years. So that's going to be the proof to show that you are active. If you have a formal affiliation with an agency, then proof of that is going to be coming from a signed letter on official letterhead from that agency. Pretty easy to get. I'll show you an example of that here in just a minute. If you don't have a formal affiliation and are just working under ABFO mentorship, you're going to need to have them write a letter and submit that to the C&E committee, basically proving that they have been mentoring you for the last X amount of years. Again, minimum of 2 years at least. It could be theoretically longer. So here's an example of a letter from an official agency. Again, very simple, just states that I was providing this service to the Knox County Regional Forensic Center from this date to this date. Signed by the Chief Medical Examiner, and that's what I submitted as proof of my affiliation. The next category of requirements is the autopsy requirement. You'll see here that you have to have 5 completed autopsies, and that basically means you have to observe them, and that is going to come in proof of a letter signed by somebody from the agency at which you observed the autopsies. They're going to want the date, the case number, the jurisdiction, and the pathologist, if possible, for each autopsy. Note that this does not have to all be from the same office or jurisdiction. They can be from different locations. I would tell you to just make sure that you get the appropriate signatures for each location and not, get those mixed up as you're working on getting proof of having observed these autopsies. One of my tips for this is, these medical examiners, these pathologists, these autopsy techs are busy. They have a lot going on. There's a lot of cases that roll through each day. There's a lot of paperwork that rolls through each day. If you're able to have your documentation ready at the time that you're walking out the door so that you can get a signature on it that day, that's going to make things so much easier for you and not having to try to track that down later. If you can't have it done that day, I would tell you to try to get it finished as soon as possible after you observe those autopsies so that, again, somebody's not having to try to look at something that was done 2 years ago and sign off on it. Here is the example for myself. I attended an actual formalized course that was doing autopsy observations, so that's why there's more than 5 there. But this is essentially very similar to what they would want to see. They were all done by the same pathologist because they were all done on the same day at the same location. So that's why there's not multiple pathologists listed. But if you did have multiple pathologists, it would be nice to indicate the pathologist who did each case and then making sure you get that signature. So there's the autopsy requirements reviewed. Up next is testimony. So as you can see here, we do have to have 1 formalized testimony as part of your requirements, and there's 3 ways to potentially get that fulfilled. So the first way is for you to actually provide a testimony in a court case. Now, it can't just be any court case. It needs to be a forensic dentistry case. So either ID, age assessment, pattern injury / bite mark, or potentially a dental malpractice case. So if you have given a testimony or a deposition for any of those, that will meet this requirement. For proof, you just need to submit the transcript of your testimony or deposition, and that's going to show that you've completed that requirement. Another way you can check mark this requirement is by completing the ABFO Civil Litigation Workshop. They hold this workshop every other year in odd-numbered years. They currently are allowing participants and observers. You have to be a participant to earn credit for the workshop. You can't just observe and say you've gotten your testimony and requirement. You do have to be a participant that goes through the whole process of reviewing a malpractice case, writing a report for it, and then participating in a mock trial. For proof of this, you're going to submit the ABFO case completion letter that you get after successful completion of the workshop. That is what it looks like. Again, it shows that I received my credit for testimony right here. Sometimes these letters will state that they are forwarding a copy to the C&E committee. However, it is not the C&E committee's responsibility to keep track of all that. It is your responsibility. So make sure that you get a copy of this letter in your case file for your application so that you can submit it when the time comes. The last way that you can potentially get this testimony requirement fulfilled is to complete a course or workshop in civil litigation. That does need to be approved by the C&E committee. So if you're going to participate in something that's not run by the ABFO, make sure you reach out to the C&E chair to ask if that workshop or course will count, and then ask what they are going to want you to submit as proof of course completion. Sometimes that's just a course completion certificate. Sometimes they may want something else. So if this is the route that you go, just make sure that you're reaching out to the C&E committee committee chairperson ahead of time to get the approval before you participate. So that's the testimony requirement. This is the casework requirement, and this is kind of the biggest chunk of these actual requirements. This is where a lot of the, quote, meat and potatoes is located. There's kind of a lot of little kind of subsections of this. So I'm going to break that down. We're going to go through it step by step and hopefully kind of make this a little less daunting, as I know a lot of people kind of look at this the first time and they get a little kind of discouraged just from the sheer amount of information that's here. So don't panic. I'm going to walk you through it. It's going to be great. First thing we need to know is that there's 32 cases required overall. And the breakdown is that that's 20 ID cases, 5 age assessment cases, 4 bite mark or pattern injury cases, and then an additional 3 cases that can be any combination of the 3 other case types or abuse or a civil litigation case. So we're going to start with ID. And in terms of ID, we need total 20 cases. So 20 identification cases, and there are some subsets, some sub-requirements, I guess, for lack of a better word, in these 20 cases. First up, we need 15 positive identifications. So 15 of the 20 need to have the conclusion be a positive identification. 5 of these cases need to have jaw resections completed by you, yourself, and 10 of these cases need to have radiographs taken by you, yourself. So you'll note that 10 out of the 20, you have to take the radiographs. That means that at least 10 of the other cases can be done kind of remotely. Let's say you work for a jurisdiction that the autopsy techs are trained to take all the records and they send those to you. You can do cases that way, only up to 10. We have some diplomates that are willing to kind of digitally send records and have you do a case kind of from a different location. So that's a way to get case requirements. So there's some open ways to get these 20 cases taken care of. So as I said, 20 total cases. If you are affiliated with a jurisdiction and you get a lot of casework, then you may get all of your 20 cases from that jurisdiction. Maybe you have an affiliation, but you just don't get a lot of casework, or let's say you're not affiliated, you can't get affiliated, so you may have to rely on somebody else to help you get these cases. You can certainly do that. That's, again, the situation where someone else is collecting the records, sending them to you, you do the analysis and write the report. And then the last way that you can get some of these cases is through the ABFO identification workshop. That workshop is held in even-numbered years, and I'd just like to point out that only 5 cases can be earned in that workshop, but that's still, 5 cases towards your requirements. As a reminder, 15 of those 20 cases must be a positive identification. So if you've got 20 exclusions, that's not going to work. You've got to get 15 of the 20 that have a positive ID. That means the remaining 5 can be really any combination of the other possible designations. Here in years past, there's been some exceptions made for these ID cases in which unidentified cases can be used. They try not to let you use those because you don't have a comparison in those cases. If they're unidentified, you don't have any mortem records, you can't, again, make that comparison. But if you're just really struggling to get like that last case, you might reach out to the C&E committee. If you've got an unidentified case you might see if that would work to kind of help finish up those requirements. So another caveat with these ID cases is if you work a mass fatality incident or event, the IDs that you do as part of that will not meet the requirement. Now, some jurisdictions will consider, a 3-car accident to be a multi-fatality incident. I don't think that's what they're meaning here. I think they're meaning like if you work a plane crash or, some sort of natural disaster where they are using kind of a DMORT team or a statewide mass fatality team, that's what they're talking about. Those IDs won't count. But, if you've got, two vehicles that have a head-on collision and they both had 4 people in each car, so you've got 8 people that died, that's not what I would consider a mass fatality incident for the purposes of these requirements. Now, keep in mind you've got to do 5 jaw resections. That means you yourself have to physically perform that resection. Couple of things to keep in mind. Soft tissue cuts to expose the jaws count as a resection. You do not have to make a bony cut for it to be considered a resection. Let's say you just need to cut away some of the soft tissue to really be able to get in there, get things positioned, get the jaws open. That will count as a resection. Let's say you don't really have much soft tissue in the way, but you can't get the mandible open wide enough for you to get your x-ray sensor in there. So you need to cut through the body or the ramus of the mandible. If you cut just the mandible, that will count as a resection. You don't have to make any cuts in the maxilla. With these resections, I would like to state that you need to make sure you have permission to do the resection before you do it. We need to be respectful not only to the victims, but to the medical examiner or coroner who has jurisdiction over those victims, and make sure we're not manipulating them in any way that we don't have permission to manipulate. There is a caveat for jaw resections done in a mass disaster situation. You can count them only if you were supervised, and then you have someone sign off on that stating, yes, you did them, and yes, you were supervised while you were doing them. I don't think that this is going to happen very often, but just know that it is a possibility if you happen to be able to do some jaw resections in this manner. I love this little note because it's basically stating you've got to get these jaw resections required however you can get them required. There are some jurisdictions that don't allow jaw resections, or there are some jurisdictions that, the autopsy techs are taking care of the jaw resections. So it may be challenging for you to get these, and ultimately right now the ABFO's stance is it's up to you to get those requirements however you can get those requirements. That may mean you've got to get on a plane and fly to another location. The ABFO says, yep, if that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do. So if you're struggling to get this requirement, again, reach out to the Diplomate Development Committee chairperson, and they'll see if they can't help connect you with someone that might be able to help you fulfill this requirement. So still under IDs, remember we've got a radiograph requirement as well, that you have to take the radiographs in at least 10 of the cases. Again, there are some jurisdictions where it's the autopsy techs that collect all that evidence, and you don't ever see the light of day inside the morgue. That may make it a struggle for you to get these radiographs, but they've still got to be done somehow, some way. But you don't have to do that for all of your cases. So, work on getting the cases that you can get without having to take the radiographs yourself, and then tackle the radiograph requirement at a later date if need be. Again, unfortunately, kind of like the jaw resection requirement, the ABFO's kind of current stance is it's your responsibility to get these requirements through whatever means you can. That, again, may mean traveling to another location, working outside of your geographical area, etc. So, again, if you're struggling to get this, let me know. Let the Diplomate Development Committee know, and we'll see if we can't help connect you to someone that can help you fulfill this requirement. With your ID cases, you're going to fill out all of these cases on the ABFO casework summary sheet. Those are found, again, in the Diplomate's Reference Manual, the DRM, that Section 3, Policies and Procedures. They are located, I believe, right after the requirements section, so you don't have to scroll too much further to find these case sheets. Each case is going to have to be signed off by a representative where you did that case. So, the medical examiner, the pathologist, the lead autopsy tech, somebody with that jurisdiction is going to have to sign off that you completed that case. My tip to you is if you will fill these out as you do the cases and get the signatures once you complete the case, that will make it so much easier to get all of that completed and have it ready to go when you've got all your requirements done and are ready to submit an application. So here is that sheet. Again, there's the examination date, which if you take the records, it's the date you go in and actually do your postmortem exam. If they were sent to you by somebody else, it's whatever date they collected them on. The jurisdiction is pretty self-explanatory. Case number is explanatory. Did you have to do a resection? Yes or no. Did you take the x-rays? Yes or no. Is it a positive ID? Yes or no. And then the signature from, again, the authorizing agent. If you have any questions about how to fill this out, again, reach out to the chair of the Diplomate Development Committee, and they'll be happy to help you get that taken care of. The last kind of component on the identification requirement is that you will be required to submit a case in full to the C&E committee for review. So that means antemortem records, postmortem charting, postmortem radiographs, your report, and anything else that you use to complete the case. You cannot use an ABFO workshop case for this submission. So it's got to come from your own casework. It's got to be something that was not ABFO generated. It needs to be something that you did every aspect of the case. My tip here is that the purpose of submitting these cases is for them to assess your knowledge and skills. They want to make sure that you can have a decent chance at passing the examination. So they really want to make sure that you understand what you're doing with an ID, how to carry out the process. Are you taking good records for these comparisons, etc. So pick a case that showcases all of that. Make sure you've got good quality records. I would advise trying to find a case where you've got multiple points of comparison with a variety of methods, so not just restorations. It's great, it's lovely when you have somebody that has every tooth in their head restored. It makes it really easy to do an ID, but pick a case that maybe has some restorations, some root anatomy, some sinus morphology, some different things that you're using besides just the restorations. So that's the ID casework. hopefully that kind of breaks down those requirements a little bit better for you and seems a little less overwhelming. Age assessment casework, there's a lot of kind of little sub-requirements in this area. Just make sure you're hitting all those requirements and those sub-requirements. This is where John Nace's spreadsheet, Dr. Nace's spreadsheet, really would be helpful because, again, it kind of breaks all that down and turns everything green once you've hit all those little sub-requirements as well. So here's the broad overview. As you can see, kind of a lot of little indentations here and there for various different things. So let's jump into it. It's a total of 5 cases, and the breakdown on that is 1 child case, 1 adolescent case, and 1 adult case. And then the other 2 cases can be any of those 3 age intervals. Okay, so sub-requirements, we have to have at least 1 case that is not an ABFO case. So meaning coming from your own casework, your own, again, your own casework. But then there's also the requirement that you have to have at least 1 case be an ABFO case, either from the workshop or from the repository. So I'll kind of get into those 2 aspects here in a minute. So you can theoretically use workshop and repository cases to, you can max out the allowable ABFO cases if you so desire. So, again, this is stating that you can submit cases from the ABFO workshop. You will get 3 cases maximum from the workshop, typically a child case, an adolescent case, and an adult case. So if you pass the workshop in its entirety, that's the maximum amount of cases you can use for your work requirements. Now, you will note that I just went through the overall requirements, and you have to have 1 child, 1 adolescent, 1 adult. So if you pass the workshop, you have officially met that requirement as well. So that's an easier way to kind of knock out getting 1 case in each of the 3 age intervals. You can only use 1 workshop case from each age group. So this basically means you can't do the workshop 2 separate years and get multiple cases through the workshop. It's 3 cases max, 1 in each age interval. That's the most you can earn from an ABFO workshop. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Essentially, the only reason that you would typically do the workshop more than once is if you didn't pass 1 of the cases, you can come back and do the workshop again and try to pass that age that you didn't pass the first time. So, again, you have to, basically, if you do the workshop, you're going to have to submit the cases at a level that would be appropriate for getting credit. That kind of makes sense. If you're not doing them at the level that is appropriate, we're not going to give you case credit for them, etc. This workshop is held in odd numbered years, along with the civil litigation one. So just keep in mind we do alternate between the 4 workshops. So 2 of them are held on odd numbered years, 2 of them are held on even numbered years. If you successfully complete the workshop in any manner, be that 1 case or all 3 cases, you're going to get a case credit letter. Here's what mine looks like. It notes that I got 3 case credits. Here's what I got credit for. Again, keep the copy of this letter, X, Y, and Z. Make sure this is what you keep to submit, and this will show you how many case credits you got. So the other way that you can get ABFO cases is through the repository. You can use age assessment repository cases towards your requirements. However, you cannot get a repository case unless you have successfully completed the workshop and gotten at least 1 case credit in the workshop, or you have to submit one of your own cases for review. Again, this is to make sure that you can successfully complete an age assessment case, and the way that is judged is if you passed a case in the workshop or having your own case review and make sure that it's at the level it needs to be. If you choose to access a repository case, you reach out to the ABFO Age Assessment Committee Chair. Again, they are listed on the ABFO website under committees, and their email will be under the Diplomate listing, and state, you email them and you say, hey, I'd like to do a dental age repository case. They will then provide to you instructions on how to access the case and what you need to submit for case credit. You can specify the age interval that you want. So let's say you lack a child case. You can request a child repository case. If you go this route and you do a repository case, again, you're going to get instructions and you're going to be given a deadline for what you need to do and when you need to submit it. My tip to you is follow these instructions and the deadlines. The people that are reviewing these cases are doing this in their spare time. They're doing this without pay. And so, be respectful of that. Don't turn things late. Don't turn anything halfway done. If they have specifically requested certain things, make sure that you are complying with that and following that. If you don't, it again just kind of gives you a little bit of a black mark, and you really don't want to have those against you while you're trying to get these requirements done. There is a maximum of 2 repository cases that you can use for your requirements. So keep in mind that you need 5 age cases. So theoretically, you can get 5 cases by doing the workshop and getting 3 cases there, and then 2 cases through the repository. However, actually, we'll go to this slide because that's basically what that states. You again can get your 5 cases that way, but you are still going to have to do 1 case that has no tie to the ABFO in any way, because you cannot submit an ABFO case for review as part of your application. We'll cover that here in a minute. If you're really struggling to get age assessment cases and struggling to get your own age assessment cases, one tip I have is if you're working with an ABFO mentor or you have a supervising forensic dentist, ask to do an age assessment for an ID case. Typically, you'll have all the records you would need for that. You even typically have a birth date, so you can kind of check your age assessment against the known age. So that is one way, and there are plenty of diplomates that will allow you to do that. For ID cases, they would just need to review the report and then sign off on the case on the summary sheet. So just like the ID cases, there is an age assessment casework summary sheet. Again, they will have to be signed off on by a representative from the jurisdiction. And if you will fill this out as you go and get signatures as you go, it makes things so much easier. Here's what an example of that looks like. You will notice, there's dates here for when the records were collected. Here's the jurisdiction. These are the 3 workshop cases that I just listed, ABFO and where the workshop was that year. The case numbers are there for the ABFO, just DAA will work. Were you the primary investigator, meaning did you complete the actual age assessment? Were you the one that did the age assessment and collect the records and that sort of thing? Yes. Case type, this is the age interval that it's in, child, adolescent, or adult. And then is this the case that you're going to submit for review? You really should only have 1 yes in this column, and the rest of them should be no. And then again, signatures from whoever is the appropriate person to sign off of them in the jurisdiction that you did them for. As with ID, you are again going to have to submit 1 age assessment case in full. So the official request stating, what they want you to do with the age assessment, any charting that's done, any radiographs that are taken, any work product such as like a Photoshop file where you've kind of adjusted the image to better stage, or if you used quick sheets, that sort of thing. All of the components of the case that you used for completing the case. Again, this is where I state that even though you can get 5 age cases through the ABFO, you're still going to have one case be your own case because you can't submit an ABFO case, workshop, or repository. So you can still get five ABFO cases and then just use one of those cases in your additional casework requirement. So as I said with age, pick a case that really showcases your skills. If you only have one case that comes from your own casework, then you're kind of limited. But if you have multiple cases that were from your own casework, pick a case that has multiple techniques so that can really show your understanding of dental age assessment. Next up is our bite mark or pattern injury requirements. This is one of the areas that it seems to be kind of the toughest to meet. And the ABFO has really worked towards trying to find a way to make it easier to get this requirement, but still have the appropriate assessment to make sure, again, that you can successfully challenge the examination. They don't want people who are just not prepared enough to take the exam, spend the time, energy, and money doing the exam just to not pass. So let's go through these requirements. Overall, you've got to have 4 cases. Those can be current or historical cases. And out of those 4, the minimum of 1 has to have gone to comparison. So you could theoretically only have 1 case that you did a comparison with, and the other 3 cases just simply went through the injury analysis portion. A sub-requirement in this area is that one of the cases has to be an ABFO case that basically did go to comparison. So it's kind of, if you do an ABFO case, you're going to meet this requirement as well as the requirement of having a comparison case. So you kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone just by doing this ABFO case. And if you take the ABFO pattern injury workshop, which is held in even-numbered years, if you successfully pass that, you're going to get credit for 2 bite mark cases, and you're going to get a case that satisfies Part B, which is you've got to do an ABFO case that goes to comparison. So not only are you going to get 2 cases, but you're going to also check mark another kind of sub-requirement in this area. Again, if you do the workshop, you're going to get 2 cases. But let's say that you can't do the workshop or you're just really struggling to get additional bite mark cases. The ABFO does have a repository that you can do cases from. There is a maximum allowance of 2 repository cases, so you can only use the repository for 2 cases. You cannot get all 4 cases from the repository, just an FYI. The way that you get a repository case is similar to how you do for age. You contact the chair of the bite mark committee, again, that is listed on the ABFO website, and you will have to show proof of one of the following: either successful completion of the ABFO workshop, or you will have to submit 2 bite mark cases for their review. Again, that is to make sure that you are capable of completing the repository cases in the required manner. So, if you don't have 2 historical cases or current cases, then the only way to get the repository is to complete the workshop. For submission of these requirements for your application, if you're using ABFO cases, either through the workshop or the repository, you should get a completion letter that tells you the case credit that you're getting. Those are the letters that you will submit as proof that you've got those case credits. So very similar to the previous letter for Civil Lit and Age that you've seen. This is the letter for the pattern injury. You'll note right here, 2 bite mark cases. Again, retain this letter because it's your responsibility to make sure you have that available for submission when the time comes. Kind of the little, another kind of sub-requirement for pattern injury is that each case that went to comparison, you need to have compared to at least one suspect dentition. So in other words, if it can go to comparison, you need to have gone to comparison with it. But remember, you only have to have one case that goes that far. If you do the ABFO workshop, you will have met all of those requirements that I just said. As with age and ID, there is a casework summary sheet. These cases will need to be listed on this sheet, all the appropriate information filled in, and then signed off by the appropriate person. Once again, if you fill these out as you go, get signatures as you go, it will be so much easier for you down the road. So here's again an example. If it's a historic case, you'll stay historic case. If it's a current case, you'll list the jurisdiction that it was for. If it's workshop, you'll kind of list that out, kind of like we saw in age. Primary investigator means did you collect all the records? Did you do any evidence collection, etc.? If you did not do that, it's a no. If it's an ABFO case, yes or no. Again, workshop cases are yes, repository cases are yes. And then which case are you submitting? You should only have one yes here because you only have to submit one case. So just some overall tips and tricks for this area, because again, it's one of the harder areas to get the requirements. The ABFO workshop is one of the more efficient ways to check mark a lot of boxes. You get 2 cases, you're going to get access to the repository, and you're going to get an ABFO approved case and a case that went to comparison. So if you successfully complete the ABFO workshop, basically you just need 2 more cases, and it just opens more doors for you to be able to get that. I will say if you have 0 experience with pattern injuries or bite marks, do not participate in the workshop first. I would tell you to observe it. It's very difficult to pass this workshop without any kind of previous experience or education. So I think it's more advantageous to observe it first, get a good background, and then try to participate. Hopefully everybody's kind of putting 2 to 2 together and seeing that you can in fact get 4 cases through ABFO means. You can max out 2 from the workshop and then 2 from the repository. Again, this was developed to try to help meet these requirements as it was recognized that it's very challenging to get bite mark cases. But I do think it's important to note that you still have to have 1 non-ABFO case to submit as part of your application. So you're still going to have 1 outside bite mark case regardless. Again, you can max out the ABFO cases. You can go get all 4 and then just use that extra case in your additional case requirement. So how do you get outside cases? If you're not affiliated and you're just not getting these cases from an outside source, there are some potential avenues that I just think you should be aware of. Structured fellowship programs, those typically will have education in pattern injury, and as such, you'll typically get case credit for that through that program. In the past, there have been basically kind of mini residencies in pattern injury analysis and comparison. Participation in and successful completion of those residencies can be a way to get case credit. The last way that you could potentially get an outside case is by doing it under the mentorship/supervision of an ABFO diplomate. Notice there are asterisks there, and why are there asterisks there? Simply because this is really kind of a last resort. The C&E committee has really been trying to be understanding of the challenges in getting some of these requirements, and as such, this is kind of the way they are addressing some of those challenges. So it is possible for you to get an outside case by working with an ABFO diplomate. Now, the caveat is you need to reach out to the chair of C&E committee before you start the case to make sure they will accept that case as part of your requirements, as well as basically verify it's an appropriate case and an appropriate mentor for you to get case credit. Not all diplomates do bite mark cases, so we want to make sure that you're getting an appropriate case that is going to be evaluated at the appropriate level. So reach out to the CNE committee if you're struggling to get this requirement and feel like you need to do a case with a mentor. As we've said for ID and age, you are going to be required to submit a case in completion. So again, that means the official request, all the photographs, the workshop or the work product, the report, and any other information you use to complete the case. Keep in mind, this cannot be an ABFO workshop or repository case. It's got to be an outside case. And as with the others, you know, pick a case that shows good analysis. I would typically tell you, if you can, show comparison, because they're going to want to see how you approach that process. And you know, make sure that you've got a good report to submit, so that they can again really assess your skills and your knowledge in this area. There is another kind of big warning paragraph, I guess, for lack of a better word. Cases that are ABFO cases and cases that you submit as part of your application are property of the ABFO. And what that means is you are not going to get any of your materials back once you submit them to the ABFO, be it for a workshop or a application. Those then become property of the ABFO, and that previous paragraph basically states you are not to share any of that material. You are not to share it with other interested forensic dentists. You are not to share it outside of basically your work product for the workshop or as part of your application. I will tell you they take that very, very seriously. So if they find out that you have shared any of that ABFO case materials, you will probably have a hard time becoming certified because you've just violated something that you've said you wouldn't do. For the workshop, you have to sign a non-disclosure. So again, just don't do it. Don't share ABFO bite mark case materials in any way, shape, or form. If you need a picture, Google it. There's plenty of bite mark photos on Google. Again, I don't want to see any of you guys getting in trouble for doing something that just isn't necessary. The last portion of casework requirements is that you've got to have 3 additional cases outside of the ID, bite mark, and age requirements. This can be any combination of the listed areas of forensic dentistry. So, you know, three more ID cases is not hard to get. You know, again, sometimes you can use those extra ABFO bite mark or ABFO age cases in this area. And for submission of proof, you would just include those extra cases on the appropriate casework summary sheets. Nothing extra that you have to provide, just, you know, list them on the casework summary, provide the appropriate signatures. If it's a repository case, submit the completion letter. The last aspect of these application requirements is additional activity. And there's a variety of different ways that you're going to be able to accumulate points. And you ultimately need 350 points made up of these different additional activity areas. Now, you cannot repeat anything here under additional activity that you used as the obligatory requirements. So, you know, you can't use your meetings in the meeting requirement and the additional activity. You can't use cases in both the casework requirement and additional activity. So just keep that in mind. The acceptance of any of these items submitted is for additional activity is up to the CNE committee. You know, if you're sticking to the things that I outline upcoming and it's pretty clear that they fall under those categories, there's not going to be a whole lot of question about whether or not it's going to count. But if you're doing something a little outside of the box and you're just not sure, reach out to the CNE committee chair, let them know what you're doing, and try to get them to tell you yay or nay before you do it. So here's the areas in which you can earn these additional activity points, and we'll kind of go through each of them individually. But basically there are 8 different areas in which you can accumulate these 350 required points. First up is extra casework. You can earn up to 100 points for extra cases. Extra cases are worth 20 points each, so a maximum of 5 extra cases will get you the most points you can get in this area. They can be any type of case, so ID, age, or bite mark for sure. Some abuse cases might be accepted. That's probably more at the discretion of the C&E committee, but it's possible. And my tip is that this is one of the easier ways to max out points. Again, you've got access to ABFO cases with repositories and workshops. So this is an area in which you can really knock out 100 points pretty easily. For submission of these, you would basically just list the extra cases on the appropriate sheet, get the appropriate signatures. Again, if you're using a repository or workshop case, just include the letter showing the case credit. The second way in which you can get extra activity is through extra testimonies. So again, there's a maximum of 100 points that you can earn here. It's 20 points per additional deposition or testimony. Again, this really needs to be probably forensic dentistry related. And for submission of proof, you will just provide the transcripts of the testimony or the deposition if it's a deposition. The third way you can earn additional points is continuing education. There is a maximum amount of 100 points that can be earned in this area, and it's essentially 1 point per hour of CE credit. Now, you cannot use the 4 meetings that you claimed as your meeting requirements in this area. So keep that in mind. But remember, let's say you attended the ASFO and the AAFS. You can essentially use one of them for your meeting attendance requirement and then the other down here in your continuing education additional activity area. So, decide which one makes more sense to use where and then put the other one in the other category. For submission here, again, you're going to supply your certificate of attendance or your certificate of completion. They are going to want to see the name of the course, the date, and the hours awarded. Keep in mind that acceptance of a course is going to be at the discretion of the C&E committee. So if it's something that doesn't just look like it really fits the bill, they may ask you for additional documentation. If you're looking at a course and you're just kind of like, I'm not 100% sure this would count, reach out to the C&E committee, send the course info to them, and just get a confirmation of either a yay or an A before you invest the time and money in attending the course. The fourth way that you can get additional activity points is by presenting a lecture or kind of demonstration or presentation at a variety of different locations. Now, it's 25 points per presentation with a maximum of 100 points potentially earned. The caveat is you have to make this 4 unique and separate presentations to max out your points. You cannot just give the same lecture 4 times and it count. So it has to be 4 unique or separate presentations, or 2 separate and unique presentations if you only need 50 points. So the other caveat is you cannot use any lectures or presentations that you used for your participation credit. So if you presented original research at the AAFS meeting and you listed that as your meeting participation requirement, you cannot use it down here to get 25 points. For submission of proof for these, you need to supply any kind of brochure or abstract or a lecture flyer or meeting program, that sort of thing. If you lecture to an organization or an entity, you need to have somebody write and sign a letter outlining when you talked, who you talked to, what topic you covered, that sort of thing. Here's an example of one of those. This was a lecture for a graduate level course, and the topic covered was Introduction to Forensic Dentistry. there's the different things that was covered, the date of the lecture, how long I lectured, and then signed by the course director. The next way that you can earn additional activity points is publications. This is a publication in a journal, a textbook, some other published entity. You'll notice that you can potentially earn up to 75 points. The first publication can be up to 50. The point breakdown is going to depend on what type of article, what journal it was published in, or what textbook it was published in, etc. And then 25 points can be awarded for a second article or any kind of textbook chapter or things like that you are a collaborating author on. Again, they're going to want to see this in some sort of peer-reviewed publication. Again, this is an area where acceptance is going to be up to the C&E committee. If you have any questions about whether something is going to count, reach out to the chair of the C&E committee. Another way that you can get additional activity points is extra years of affiliation. Remember that there is a mandatory 2 years as part of the general requirement, or as part of the main requirements. And but if you are, let's say you're affiliated for 4 years, then you can earn an additional 40 points because it's 20 points per year for those extra 2 years of affiliation. Your submission of proof is going to be a signed letter similar to what is submitted for the affiliation requirement. Again, state the years of affiliation, make sure it's signed by the appropriate person. The seventh way that you can earn additional activity points is by participating in a mass disaster or mass fatality event. So there's different ways that you can earn points. You can earn 1 point per hour for attending an exercise or participating in an exercise. Then you can earn 25 points for organizing and directing. So you can theoretically max out 40 points here if you do events in which you are both organizing and directing and attending. Keep in mind you can't use IDs or radiographs obtained during these events, but this is a manner in which you can use your mass fatality experience to earn application requirement points. Simply being a member on a team does not earn points. You have to actually participate in an activity or a training exercise. So keep that in mind. Just being a member on the team doesn't earn points. Active participation does. To submit proof, you're going to need a letter showing the details of the event and the hours participated. That will then need to be signed by the section leader or the event organizer, whoever has the authority to speak that you participated in the manner in which you participated. The last way in which you can earn additional activity points is by serving on a forensic committee. This is intended to be a forensic dentistry committee, but some other forensic committees can potentially count. So just keep that in mind. Points are awarded per term. So it's 10 points for just serving on the committee, 25 points for being the chairperson, and again, those are per term. So if you just serve on a committee for 1 year and the term is 1 year, then it's 10 points for that 1 year. If your term is 3 years, then it's 10 points for the whole 3 years. It's not 10 points per year, just 10 points for the 3 years. You can accumulate points for each committee you serve on. So if you serve on multiple committees, it's not you only get X amount per year. It's per committee per term. So just keep in mind, if you're serving on multiple committees, you can theoretically earn points for all of the committees. There's a maximum amount that you can accumulate, and that is 100. So that's kind of the point breakdown here. For submission of proof, again, this is going to be a letter from either the committee chairperson or somebody in the committee that's organizing everything, confirming your service and your term, and whether or not that was a full term, was X amount of years, etc. So those are the ways you would earn the additional activity Those are the different breakdowns. Some tips and tricks and recommendations, I guess, in terms of accumulating these 350 points. My opinion is extra cases and CE credit are some of the easier ways to get these points. I would encourage you to try to maximize these two areas because you can pretty easily get 200 points out of the 350 just from these two categories. Giving a lecture and a presentation can also be another fairly easy way to get these points. You can lecture to a lot of potential people. Medical examiner's offices, obviously, law enforcement, you could potentially even give an abuse lecture at the Department of Human Services, dental organizations, hygiene organizations, local study clubs. Those sort of places would be great people to lecture to. Again, you can lecture on any aspect of forensic dentistry that you want to lecture on. Just remember that to be able to maximize your points, you need to have separate, unique presentations. So if you give 4 separate, unique presentations, this is another way to max out and earn 100 points. So there's 3 kind of options for pretty easily and readily getting to 300 points. If you are just really struggling to get these last few points in this additional activity, let's say you've got all your other requirements, you've got your autopsies, your affiliation, your casework, your meetings, you've gotten everything done except for this 350 of additional activity. Reach out to the C&E committee, tell them what struggles you're having, tell them the things you've tried, the things that haven't been successful, and a lot of times they will either give you some guidance, they might give you some ideas for how to achieve getting the rest of the points. But it also kind of just informs the C&E committee of certain issues. If they're discovering that one thing is really consistent in terms of being an issue, it may lead to revamping of these requirements in the future. Another tip that I have is if you've got something forensic dentistry related that doesn't fit into one of those categories, it doesn't mean you can't use it. It just means that you need to kind of have approval. Reach out to the C&E committee, explain what you've done, explain what it is, and ask if there's a way that it can be used for additional activity points. The worst thing they can say is no, and then you're not really any worse off than you were. The best thing they can say is yes, and it may put you one step closer towards being able to apply for ABFO examination. So I know that's a lot of information. There's a lot that was covered in all of this. If you have questions, there's really 2 places to get your questions answered in terms of these requirements and this process. And that is the chair of the Diplomate Development Committee or the chair of the ABFO Certification and Examination Committee. You're going to reach out to the Diplomate Development Committee for general questions about requirements. What does this mean? Interpreting these requirements. Those are the kinds of things that committee is really designed to help with. You're going to reach out to them for general questions about the application process. Hey, what do I need to use? What do I need to submit? How do I compile all of this? What order does it need to be in? That sort of thing. The DDC can help with that. Let's say you've turned your application in and you've been accepted. Now you have questions about the examination process. Some of those general questions the DDC can also help with. And then lastly, you may just be still really early in this process, or maybe you're not, and you just have some general questions about the ABFO. The Diplomate Development Committee is, again, kind of the bridge between interested individuals and the board itself. So those kinds of questions will come to the DDC. Questions that need to go to the C&E committee are specific questions about you, your requirements, what you have, what you are going to do to fulfill a specific requirement. The Diplomate Development Committee is not going to be the judge and jury on what will and will not count. That's the C&E committee, so that's where those questions need to go. If you are having a repeated issue trying to obtain your requirements, again, that needs to go to the C&E committee because they are the ones that are going to make any kind of accommodations or alternative acceptance of things that can be used instead. Not saying that is going to happen. I'm just saying if you're running into issues, reach out to them. see if there's anything they can provide as kind of a workaround or guidance. If you get to the point where you're ready to submit an application and you just need to know where and how and the process, that's going to be the C&E committee, because again, they're the ones that need to have access to that information, and where and how they want it is going to come from them, not the Diplomat Development Committee. So hopefully this was informative. Hopefully this helped you kind of interpret all these requirements and maybe have a better idea of how to approach getting this accomplished. I am Shaunatha Collier, so I am the current chair of the Diplomat Development Committee. I am here to be a resource. My committee is here to be a resource. We are happy to help answer any questions that you have that are appropriate for us to answer. Again, keep in mind the questions that need to go to the C&E committee. But that is my email. That's the best way to get a hold of me. And I will be happy to provide any guidance I can as you navigate the path to ABFO certification.